Hello, it's the Sinister II here with a new video. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Sparrow and Sea Sparrow in Grand Theft Auto Online. Now, starting off, I do usually go over the version that comes out first, but because the Sea Sparrow is kind of a superior version to the Sparrow, I'll actually be going over the Sparrow from the Cayo Perico Heist first, which actually came out later, but yeah. Starting off with customizations here, there's actually not that many for customizations. There's very particular respray options for some reason, only limited to 30, which is very weird. I think they're the same exact 30 or whatever, if I recall, from like the getaway vehicles for the Diamond Casino Heist, if I recall. So that's why the 30 are what they are, I suppose. And then for weaponry, there's missiles and then the machine gun. The missiles have no cooldown, as I'll be showing off later here. And then the machine gun, I'm not going to really show off the machine gun because Rockstar for some reason has it where like you have to constantly buy the missiles and machine guns again and again. And I don't feel like buying missiles again for like 200,000. Like I know it's so easy to make money now, but like that's something they really should change in my opinion. I don't know why like the people in mod shops seem to throw away the weapons and you gotta like buy it for the same price again. And then I'll be going into the performance here actually. And for the Sparrow, the performance is actually very good. Lap time is 4th place, so it's not the number 1 lap time. But the thing is, of course, helicopters, they're in the air, obviously. They don't have to do all kinds of like turns and stuff traditionally. So lap time is not necessarily the most important for a helicopter in particular. And then the top speed is actually the new number 1 when it came out, and still is as of the latest update even, for the Sparrow being 1st place, obviously. And then, yeah, I showed off, of course, that the missiles have no cooldown. It has like 4 missile pods, so that's like the amount it has, but there's like no cooldown on them, so you don't have to like wait for like a reload or anything like you do with the Buzzard, for example. Now to go into a couple of the damage resistant tests I did, which, by the way, I might have went a little crazy with the damage resistant test, because the Sparrow being a helicopter is a pretty frail vehicle. And when a vehicle is fragile, I kind of like to go crazy with some of the damage resistant tests and stuff, but yeah. Up in Atomizer, the regular Sparrow took 8 shots from that. Not that up in Atomizer should really pose much of a threat necessarily, but still. I just want to show how fragile it kind of is, obviously. And then I used the military rifle here, and it seems 86 shots to the, like, engine there, of course. Took like 86 rounds to disable it. Took around 110, I believe, to get on fire, and then I think destroying it entirely, it took like 140. So yeah, the resistance on it's not that great, but trust me, it's actually better than the Sea Sparrow, believe it or not. Taking a little break from some of the damage resistant things for the Sparrow, I wanted to show off a couple things with the spawn convenience of it actually. Now, I did show off in one of the damage resistant clips, but I forgot to mention it, but the cooldown on the Sparrow is 2 minutes, which is better than the traditional personal aircraft by a couple minutes, so believe it or not, the Sparrow has a pretty good cooldown compared to most aircraft in the game. And then, I wanted to also show that it spawns next to you, so it's similar to a CO vehicle in a sense. However, though, there is a huge weakness with the spawn convenience of the Sparrow. Like, honestly, as I shown off, yes, the spawn convenience is absolutely amazing for an aircraft, at least. But, you have to call out the Sparrow if you want to, like, respawn it again, so you have to despawn it to respawn it, whereas, like, CO vehicles, if you go enough away from them, you can respawn them. And if like a CO vehicle is damaged, you can spawn a different one and then respawn the same one, and it'll actually get rid of the damage. The Sea Sparrow, the regular Sparrow doesn't really have all of that. Going into the last couple of resistant tests I want to show off, I did want to show off the explosive sniper, the heavy sniper Mark II with explosive rounds. And it's nothing special, it only takes 2 rounds, which I believe is standard for a helicopter, but there is a reason I showed it off. Usually I don't show something off if it's just standard, but the Sea Sparrow actually has a little bit of an edge when it comes to the explosive sniper, heavy sniper Mark II of explosive rounds, as I will explain later. And then I showed off the minigun test, and I believe it took like around 145 rounds for the vehicle to get disabled, around 190 for it to get on fire, and then I think it was around 270 for the entire Sparrow to be destroyed. And then I think I just showed off the like traditional like access options for the vehicle, since it's in like the services tab and not like in a traditional vehicle tab. I figured I would show it off in case there's anything kind of different and out of the ordinary with it. So that's what I don't really like intend on pointing much out with it. And then I'll go into the pro and con list for the Sparrow actually before I start going into the Sea Sparrow review. Reason being is both variants of it are technically very good for making money. For vehicles like the Insturgeon, GB700W, and like the Zaba, previous vehicles I reviewed for example, traditionally there's only one version of the vehicle that tends to be good at making money, so in that case I tend to go over all of them in like one pro-con list. But I feel that would kind of be a lot of pro-con stuff to have at once, so I kind of want to do it by vehicle in this case. So yeah. First of all, I decided to show off a sightseer with the Sparrow. Like, yeah, I know this is a very traditional one I tend to show off, but it's a helicopter. It has great point A to point B maneuverability and then also great weaponry. So what that means is it's basically a good general grinding vehicle. A lot of air vehicles are some of the better grinding vehicles, especially helicopters, in my experience, so just use your creativity to determine whatever other money-making methods you want to do, but this was one of the two I decided to show off here. And then there's one kind of obvious one I wanted to show off, because it's just such a good money maker and whatnot for sure. But yeah, anyways, go into the pro-con list for the regular Sparrow only right now. I'll try to not go into too much detail with ones that have kind of already been obvious earlier on. But yeah, first pro I have for the Sparrow is that the customizations are fairly cheap, which I think has been shown well enough already. Has decent lap time. For second pro I have. Third pro I have is it's the best top speed helicopter. But I did put something to parentheses, but it was kind of obvious with what I showed off. But for those who don't know what like black like helicopter thing I had and like the one screenshot thing, it was the Velatus. It pairs well with the CEO Velatus as a secondary transport helicopter. And Velatus is basically the number 2 top speed, and that's in the CEO menu, so you can basically have like the number 1 and number 2 top speed helicopters. And you can already have them like spawn right next to you, and that's very amazing for getting around the map in Grand Theft Auto Online. Next pro I have for the 4th pro is that missiles have no cooldown. 5th pro I have is it has a 2-minute cooldown. Those two, of course, are kind of been explained enough. 6th pro I have is it has better bullet resistance than the Sea Sparrow. And that's kind of because it actually lacks armor upgrades. So it's actually pretty impressive actually that it actually has better like general bullet resistance than the Sea Sparrow, considering it doesn't have armor upgrades. Though maybe behind the scenes it does technically have armor upgrades. But yeah, there's no buyable armor upgrades, so it's actually pretty impressive in terms of the regular Sparrow to have better bullet resistance. Next pro I have is it's one of the best grinding vehicles in the game, very top tier due to Cayo prep missions, which should kind of be on the screen right now actually. And what I might do is I might mainly just show off the moments where you actually use the Sparrow. Depends on how much like footage I need, but yeah. Cayo Perico, even with the Los Santos tuners update, it didn't really get like significantly nerfed or anything, which quite honestly I was pretty surprised, because a couple of the heists that they've done in the game, they've kind of like significantly nerfed them. Or not necessarily the heists themselves, or like some of the methods that people tend to use. That wasn't really the case with Los Santos tuners with the Cayo Perico Heist, so it has still remained the best money-making method. It's not like significantly harder now or anything. In fact, in my opinion, it's actually kind of easier than it was when it first came out. Which I may or may not go into details depending on how long the pro-con list ends up being. And then it's maneuverable, nimble, agile. I think that was kind of obvious from from earlier sections of the video. Next pro is that it's average altitude gain and agility. And then I also have it's great at evading missiles. And then next pro is it can manage tight spaces. Next pro I have is it has a fair price, and in parentheses I put it has 1 to 2 hour time investment with Cayo Perico. So yeah, with Cayo Perico you can already make the money for this in like 1 to 2 heists, and that's very amazing. And you definitely want this vehicle for Cayo Perico Heist. It's definitely one of the best vehicles in terms of grinding the heist. Because in my opinion, when putting vehicles like on top of the Kosaka, they tend to fall into the water for the most part when going inside the Kosaka. So in my opinion, it's kind of best to use the Sparrow that's inside of it, because from my experience, I try to do my best with some perk jobs of trying to put like the Mark II on top of the Kosaka, and a lot of times it just tends to fall in the water, like no matter how good I park it from my experience. So yeah, Kosaka is definitely a lifesaver for the Cayo Perico Heist, essentially. Next pro I have is it can be spawned next to you. Services Kosaka, you do it from the services menu and then Kosaka. And then the final pro I have is that spawning next to you does not require CO VIP. I actually didn't necessarily explain this one too well, that it does not require the CO and VIP to spawn it next to you. Obviously it's not a CO vehicle, so you don't need to have that. So what it essentially is it's kind of a CO vehicle that you don't need CO or like MC, so you don't have to be part of like one of those like service things or whatever to be able to spawn it, which is quite nice. And what that kind of means is that, like, if you have, for example, like an 8-player MC, all 8 players in an MC can spawn their own Sparrow, because it's not tied to a CO or, like, MC menu or something. Whereas I think the CO menu, even if you have, like, a 4-player, like, CO, only, like, one CO vehicle can be out at a time. So, not being tied to a CO MC menu means, like, all 8 people in like an MC, for example, can spawn their own individual Sparrows, which that adds a whole ton more grinding potential, not just for Cayo Perico Heist, but for general gameplay as well. So the Sparrow is quite revolutionary, as I've kind of made it out to be so far. And yeah, that was the final pro there for the Sparrow. And then going into the Sparrow for cons. First con I have for the Sparrow is it cannot have both machine guns and missiles. So unlike the Buzzard, for example, from like day 1 of the game, where it's like automatically has the missiles and machine guns attached to it, you have to choose between the missiles or the machine guns. Like yeah, for the most part, the missiles are so much better traditionally than most machine guns in the game. So it's not too much of an issue necessarily, but obviously having the option to have the machine guns on it would be quite nice. Especially for possible like parts of the game where the missiles might not necessarily be better than the machine guns. Like if you need more precision in a sense, the machine guns could be better, but obviously yeah, you can't have both of them, unfortunately. Next con I have for the Sparrow is it has significantly less customization than the Sea Sparrow. And yeah, Sea Sparrow doesn't necessarily have all that much more customizations. Obviously, being an aircraft, you don't necessarily expect the Sea Sparrow or even a regular Sparrow to have lots of customizations. But still, I think they unnecessarily cut down like too many customizations, in my opinion, for the Sparrow. Like, even if they added armor engine and like handling and stuff for the Sparrow, you probably still would have been able to complete the Sparrow and its modifications in like 1 or 2 Cayo Perico heists. So yeah, that was pretty unnecessary in my opinion, how bad it went in terms of cutting down modifications of the regular Sparrow in comparison to the Sea Sparrow. Because remember, the regular Sparrow actually came out after the Sea Sparrow by like 2 to 3 years around there, essentially. And then third con for the regular Sparrow is it has unnecessarily limited respray options, and in parentheses I put the same for the Islamic Casino Heist getaway vehicles, but yeah, I kind of explained that one. And then next con I have for the Sparrow is it's a very fragile vehicle, which for a helicopter you kind of expect, but surprisingly in some ways it's not as fragile as the Sea Sparrow. And that's even putting it into account with an armor upgrade as well. And then next con I have for the Sparrow, the regular Sparrow, is it has a cooldown when despawned, unlike CO vehicles if not destroyed. So if you do despawn your Sparrow, if you want to like respawn it somewhere else, you do have to actually deal with the 2-minute cooldown every time you do that. Whereas yeah, if you respawn a CO vehicle, you can just like respawn it as long as it's like not destroyed. If it's not destroyed, you don't have to like wait a couple minutes for another CO vehicle or something. That's what I essentially mean with that one. Next con I have is it cannot be respawned without despawning, unlike CO vehicles. So you can't respawn without despawning, which might be similar, if not like the same con I had earlier, but I kind of worded it different, so I kind of think I meant it to be a different con. Next con I have for the regular Sparrow is it has standard explosive sniper resistance, and that's actually due to the lack of armor upgrades. So there is one huge benefit to the Sea Sparrow having an armor upgrade, and that's that it can take a third explosive sniper round in case there's like anyone in like a public lobby or something that just wants to randomly mess around with you and shoot your Sea Sparrow with an explosive sniper. Sea Sparrow will actually manage to take one more with it having an armor upgrade in comparison to the regular Sparrow, which does not have that armor upgrade. And yeah, it's probably the biggest difference between having an armor upgrade and not having an armor upgrade between the two variants of the Sparrow. So yeah, standard explosive sniper resistance. Next con I have is it does not have countermeasures. This also goes for the Sea Sparrow, which I'll explain with that later maybe as well. But yeah, the regular Sparrow does not have countermeasures, which means it's going to be pretty difficult to avoid the like super accurate homing missiles from like a Ruiner 2000 and like the Vigilante and stuff like that. So for the most part, you'll probably mainly just be able to avoid like standard missiles. The Sparrow and the Sea Sparrow will probably have a very tough time dodging the more accurate missiles, no doubt, since they don't have countermeasures. And then finally, the last con is it requires a Kosaka, which I only have on there because it requires a property, but it is worth having Kosaka and a regular Sparrow for sure. Onto the Sea Sparrow here, as I already mentioned, the Sea Sparrow is actually the version of the Sparrow that came out first, which is kind of interesting considering it's kind of a better version. Most better versions of a vehicle tend to release later, so having the Sea Sparrow before the Sparrow was pretty interesting. This is like way back from early 2018 or something for like San Andreas Super Sport, whatever update that was. And yeah, the price was $1,815,000, which actually was the same exact price as the regular Sparrow, which I don't think I mentioned before, but yeah. Has armor, engine, and handling upgrades that the regular one did not. Had primary, secondary for respray, so it has like a primary and a secondary color, whereas I think the Sparrow, it might have a primary and secondary, but might all just be within the one option. So it seems you might have to choose primary and secondary unless there's just a primary on that one. And then weapons, obviously the same weapons from the regular Sparrow essentially. Going into the performance of the Sea Sparrow, it is an 8th place lap time and then a 7th place top speed in comparison to like a 4th place lap time with the regular Sparrow and then 1st place top speed with the regular Sparrow. So yeah, the performance is quite the ways down in comparison to the regular version. And then credit for lap time top speed for both vehicles go to Bruffy1322. Next, I actually want to show off the amphibious capabilities here, and basically what I take away from these couple clips is don't really try to do a hard landing whatsoever. I know it's amphibious, but you do still gotta be careful, unfortunately. Having any amphibious capabilities is definitely better than no amphibious capabilities though. And you have a vertical hard landing and a more horizontal hard landing, like I mentioned. Not really good to do at all. Definitely take it kind of nice and slow. Quite unfortunate that this amphibious vehicle is not the greatest for water landings like the Sea Breeze, for example. I think the Sea Breeze can do like all kinds of insane stuff with the Sea Breeze and it'll actually still be completely fine. But yeah, quite funnily enough, there is kind of a comparison in terms of like the 3D universe and an HD universe actually with like the vertical hard landing. And like the original Vice City, I think I tried to like hard landing vertically in the original Vice City, and Tommy Vercetti actually loses health. San Andreas, you actually see like the lung capacity meter, and then I don't have Vice City Stories, which is like the other 3D universe game. But yeah, In Vice City, he can actually lose health doing the like vertical kind of landing things, so it's kind of a funny little throwback to that in a sense. Going into the damage resistant test for the Sea Sparrow, because there is quite a difference in some ways, of course, because the regular Sparrow does not have an armor upgrade, but the Sea Sparrow does have armor upgrades. But yeah, going into Up and Atomizer, I believe the Sea Sparrow took 19 shots for that to destroy, and that does exclude the one time that I missed. I believe it took 78 shots to fully destroy the Sea Sparrow, and I don't think it was disabled. Like, I don't think the icon was gone from the map, whereas it was gone on the map for the regular Sparrow. So I guess that's something that the armor upgrade adds, is that the minimap icon will not disappear, suggesting that the vehicle is still functional until it gets fully destroyed, technically. And then explosive sniper test, that was 3 explosive sniper shots with the heavy sniper Mark II with explosive rounds, instead of the 2 with the Sparrow, which was the standard for basically any helicopter, I believe. So the Sea Sparrow does take 1 more of those in comparison to the regular Sparrow. And then finally the minigun test, I believe it took less than like 90 rounds in order to destroy. So yeah, despite the armor upgrade, it does actually like not take as much damage from regular bullets. It mainly like gets resistance for the heavy sniper Mark II with explosive rounds. That's basically the main benefit you get. And also has to get like fully destroyed to not get disabled, not counting if the vehicle's smoking, and then I believe you have like 2.5 minutes before it does get disabled. It doesn't really count that, it just won't get disabled right away. It will just go right to being destroyed essentially. That seems to be like all the stuff in terms of damage resistance and all that. Going into the pro and con list of the Sea Sparrow here, first pro I have is just the same price as the Sparrow. And the reason I put that pro on there is because technically they could have made the Sparrow less than the Sea Sparrow. Like I said before, I know that the Sea Sparrow came out first, obviously, but yeah. What I basically mean with that is they could have made the Sparrow less than this, which technically would have made this more expensive and all, but yeah. Them being the same price is kind of fair, I feel, considering both have some pretty unique purposes and stuff that a lot of vehicles don't tend to have in this game. Second pro I have is it has better customization than the Sparrow, such as like armor, engine, and handling, and by better I mean it just has like more options in general. Next pro I have is it can take an extra explosive sniper round, and that's due to the armor upgrade. It can tank 1 more explosive sniper round, which is quite nice. Next pro I have is it has every respray option, which I can't believe I had to put that as a pro, but for some reason Rockstar figured to only have like 30 respray options, which I think are the same exact ones for the Dynasty Ice getaway vehicles for the regular Sparrow, which is quite the weird decision, but yeah. Next pro I have is it has a secondary color, because technically the regular Sparrow only has the 1 color option. Next pro I have is it can actually be sold for the Sea Sparrow, because technically it's a hangar vehicle, it's not tied to Pegasus, and then it's also not like tied to the Kosaka or some other property exclusively in a sense. Next pro I have is that the customizations are fairly cheap, even with all the extra customizations it has compared to the regular Sparrow. The customizations are technically fairly cheap still, which is why I feel the Sparrow got very cheated out in terms of its customizations. The Sparrow got really cheated out because you can easy millions with the Cayo Perico Heist anyways. I feel they should have kept those options even for the regular Sparrow. And then missiles have no cooldown again for Pro, which has been explained with the regular Sparrow. It's somewhat maneuverable, nimble, agile. I put somewhat because it's technically not as maneuverable and stuff with like the pontoons it has and all that. And then I put it has slight altitude gain and agility. Again, I feel like pontoons kind of make it a bit weaker than the regular Sparrow in that regard. I have can somewhat evade missiles for the Sea Sparrow because again, the pontoons might make it somewhat more difficult. And then I have can manage tight spaces for another pro, which I think is the same exact one from the regular Sparrow and with no like alternate wording unlike with some other ones. Next one I have is it has okay lap time. 7th place is pretty decent, being within the top 10 in the helicopters class. And then next pro I have is it can land on water, which obviously is something that only it can do in comparison to the regular Sparrow. There's quite a couple of few vehicles in the game at this point that can do that, landing in the water stuff obviously. But yeah, the fact it can at all obviously is definitely a pro. And then next pro is it's the only amphibious helicopter in 8th gen GTA Online. And the reason I say that is the cargo bot was actually technically amphibious in the 7th gen versions of the game, but for some reason that feature was like completely taken out for the 8th gen. Even if you don't play the online on the 7th gen, you can simply just beat up the story mode for those like very OG players of Grand Theft Auto 5. If you go in like the story mode, have like the cargo bob Pegasus vehicle for story mode or something that's like taking the waters. There actually is technically another amphibious vehicle, but for some reason those functions were taken out for the 8th gen for some weird reason. But even if the cargo bot was amphibious in the 8th gen, it's technically has like quite the better performance, so this would still technically be the better amphibious helicopter. And then next pro I have is it's a personal aircraft. Technically not being a Pegasus aircraft, which Pegasus kind of has the most inconvenient spawns between any type of aircraft. That alone is definitely quite the pro, and I didn't really mention that when I meant to end up in atomizer testing or whatever, where I showed that it has like a 5-minute cooldown. The 5-minute cooldown is very standard, of course, for a personal aircraft, and that also does mean it does not spawn next to you. Like, yeah, when Los Santos tuners apparently first came out, apparently the personal aircraft system was bugged where they would spawn next to you, but I believe Rockstar has since hotfixed that. There probably is ways to re-enable that for like some glitching thing or something. But yeah. Next pro I have is it's a very decent grinding vehicle, just like with the Sparrow. Both of them actually kind of have some very unique purposes. Sparrow, of course, that's basically like the #1 like casual option for Cayo Perico Heist. Unless maybe you're like a speedrunner or something, then yeah, undeniably there could be faster vehicles technically, since you don't have to like go through like the going in and then going out the Kasaka cutscene, and also to speed up with the blades if you don't use like a helicopter or something. So yeah, technically there could be faster options for the Cayo Perico Heist, but Sparrow is technically the most convenient in that regard. And Sea Sparrow, as you can see in the footage, of course, I'm doing like a hangar sourcing mission, because that's the like amphibious mission I wanted to show off. So Sea Sparrow is quite the unique attack helicopter, and being able to land on the water and stuff, so it gives it quite the edge in certain ways of making money in the game, for sure. And then for the next pro I have is it's great for certain amphibious missions as seen in the gameplay right now. And the final pro I have for the Sea Sparrow is it's one of the most versatile amphibious vehicles. And what I mean with that is it's amphibious, but it also has some very great weaponry. Whereas the Dodo Seaplane, for example, that doesn't have any weaponry. For the Dodo Seaplane, Tula, it does have weaponry, but it's limited to like machine guns and then also bombs. And then there's the Sea Breeze as well, but again, that's also limited to like machine guns and bombs again, similar to the Tula. I think it's the only amphibious like aircraft that has like missiles and stuff like that, so definitely makes it kind of the best grinding amphibious vehicle, I would say, for sure, between any amphibious vehicle in the game. And then finally into the cons list for the Sea Sparrow. First con for the Sea Sparrow is it can have both machine guns and missiles, as I explained with the Sparrow. And then also it's a very fragile vehicle. In some ways even more so than the regular Sparrow, even as I showed off. For some reason it's like regular bullet resistance is not as great in terms of like military rifle and then like the minigun as I showed off. So it does actually have some disadvantages compared to the regular Sparrow. Next con I have is it does not have countermeasures, even though it does have hangar customization and stuff. For some reason they decided not to give it countermeasures, which I feel was quite a weird decision. I guess they figured with the speed it can avoid like most standard missiles at least. But still, for the more accurate missiles, for like Arena 2000, somewhat semi-accurate, somewhat semi-more accurate missiles like the Oppressor Mark II, it's probably not going to avoid those as well. So that was kind of a weird decision in my opinion. At least for the Sea Sparrow, because at least it's a hangar vehicle unlike the regular Sparrow. And then next con I have is it has worse bullet resistance despite armor upgrades, which I kind of was able to explain that in another con, but I guess I kind of meant it as another con. And I put in parentheses takes less than 100 minigun rounds, which is quite pathetic. Less than 100 minigun rounds, you can land that quite easily, I imagine, on a helicopter, for sure. As long as it's not like super high up or something. Next con I have is it has worse performance despite engine and handling upgrades than the regular Sparrow. But still, in my opinion, they definitely should have added the engine handling upgrades for the Sparrow. Like, imagine what it performs like right now, but with like engine and handling upgrades as well. That would be quite insane, I imagine. And then next con is a significantly worse top speed compared to the Sparrow, which is 7th place, I'm pretty sure, compared to the number 1, like the regular Sparrow. Next con I have is it has a 5-minute cooldown, traditional for personal aircraft, put in parentheses. It basically explained that one, which is of course 3 minutes more than the regular Sparrow, so in comparison to its other variants, it's pretty bad. And then next con I have is it's not a most top tier vehicle unlike the Sparrow. And what I mean with that is technically, yeah, the Sea Sparrow does have its own unique purposes with being an amphibious helicopter, can land on water, which was good for like the hangar sourcing mission that I showed off, for example. So yeah, even though it has that, it's not necessarily good at a lot of like top tier money making methods like Cayo Perico Heist, for example. It lacks significantly behind the Sparrow with the top speed difference, which I believe is like around 15 miles per hour, if I recall. Difference in terms of top speed. So yeah, even though it does have some money making methods, kind of compared to the Sparrow even, they're not necessarily like top tier or anything. Next con I have is it cannot be spawned next to you. And yeah, I kind of explained the Los Santos tuners bug, which I already had in the parentheses, or like glitch, whatever, which basically was when the update first came out, they would actually spawn next to you for some reason, like a personal vehicle, but yeah, I think they since hotfixed it. So unfortunately that's no longer the case, but it would be cool if that was at least a thing for at least helicopters, in my opinion, for sure, for the personal aircraft menu. So definitely consider doing that, Rockstar. Next con I have is it cannot perform hard water landings, and then I put on like the sea breeze in parentheses, which I essentially explained you can do all kinds of like crazy maneuvers with the sea breeze and water, I believe. Sea Sparrow, you can't even do a hard vertical or a hard horizontal landing either. You have to like be pretty gentle with the water landing, but at least it's possible to land on water nevertheless. And then next con I have is it is not the most maneuverable amphibious vehicle, and that's because it's not a seaplane, and what I mean by maneuverable is obviously it's not planes, it's not going to go as quickly across the map as like a plane, for example. That's basically what I meant with that. Next con I have is it can be a somewhat niche vehicle, and the reason I say that, which I have in parentheses, is there's not a lot of amphibious missions. So obviously the main highlight of the Sea Sparrow is the amphibious capabilities, and being able to do these amphibious missions a bit easier. Be able to land on water instead of having to like go on like a beach or something to get back to your like other aircraft or whatever. So yeah, but technically that's not a very useful use for like 90-95% of the game. So it is kind of niche in purpose, but still, at least it does have that unique purpose in a sense. And then finally, the final con I have is it requires a hangar, which the only reason I really have that is because it's tied behind a $1 million paywall. Similar to Sparrow, it's tied behind a 2.2 minimum $1 million paywall of the Kosaka. So I only have that one on there because of the paywall, but technically, since you can spawn into Kosaka and in the hangar, It does make it worth it if you do purchase them, because you can spawn like literally in the same property as them, which is quite useful in a sense. But yeah, finally, what do I rate the Sparrow and the Sea Sparrow? I think I'm going to give the Sparrow a 9.9 out of 10. Very useful. It's basically the best vehicle in terms of Cayo Perico, which is the #1 money-making opportunity. Nothing, in my opinion, even compares to Cayo Perico in terms of money-making. So for that reason, the Sparrow, I would say, you could kind of exchange the Sparrow and Sea Sparrow for which one you would think is the more 10 out of 10 vehicle, depending on like what you look for in a vehicle. And then personally for the Sea Sparrow, I'm actually going to give that one a 10 out of 10, even though it doesn't have anywhere near as good spawn convenience yet, and also it's not as useful for the high money making opportunities. But for me, money making is not everything for a vehicle. You gotta kind of look at the functionality and stuff as well. And I absolutely like that it can land on the water. It's the only attack helicopter in the game that can actually land on the water. I'm very certain of it. And helicopters are some of the best money-making vehicles in the game for one, great point A, point B maneuverability and stuff like that. And it's not a plane where it's hard to like land on the like road and stuff like that. And then also the no cooldown on the missiles. That's very huge as well. So the Sea Sparrow just does a lot right, even if it's not the greatest at the best money-making opportunities in the game. In a functionality standpoint, it's definitely better. So yeah, Sea Sparrow definitely gets a 10 out of 10 between those two. So that's finally going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed.